Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. It's a shame that I could not be with you on site because my client asked me to do the audit in Helsinki in Finland, so I needed to go. But I prepared the presentation for you, and I hope that you will enjoy it. Yesterday, I share with the organizers the recorded part, pre-recorded part, and it took me 60 minutes. But right now I got experience with this, and today it should be 45 minutes long because I will just cut some parts. So I would like to present my experience in the terms of third-party risk management, especially the supply chain management, the bright and the dark sides of this TPRM program. I will introduce myself. So I've got more than 15 years experience in the GRC and audit areas. Right now, I'm the CEO and the partner of the few companies, one in Poland, one in United Kingdom, and two in Dubai. And we provide services in terms of cybersecurity, information security, privacy, risk management. And I will share you my experience from working with different clients, from the corporation, so that they are managing the TPRM programs and us as their vendors. The smaller companies that are vendors for those big corporations, and as the external auditor or the SOC 2 auditor, SOC 1, SOC 2 auditor, that assess company services or internal control over over financial controls. So let's start. Let's start from the global risk perspective, and the global risk looks like that. So I think all the reports you dig in show that the cybersecurity and data security risk are top one priority for all the organization across the globe. And I see the interconnection between those risks with other risks that you see on the slide, because the more we are technology driven, and our processes are more dependent on the technology, then the more risks are associated with the cyber and data protection. Similar with because there also regulation look at those risks from their perspective. So they are preparing the laws and regulation that have to cover those risks and implement some laws like NIS2, NIS1, NIS2, GDPR, DORA, and other globally recognized laws in almost every country all over the world. So in China, we've got the cybersecurity acts, we've got the privacy acts, similar in United States, similar in Brazil, similar in the United Kingdom, and so on. So those risks are interconnected. Similar with the supply chain, as you see, the supply chain risk, they could be that could be interconnected with cybersecurity risk or business disruption. They could also be interconnected with the cyber. So this is the high-level overview. What's also quite important to mention is that the cybercrime is the third economy right now in the world. So this is the third biggest economy in the world. So first place is the United States economy. It's around $30 trillion. The second place is China, around 20. And the third place is the cybercrime economy, around $10 trillion. And it's growing. So probably next year it won't be, let's say, 9.5, but maybe over 11 trillion dollars. And based on this, you can imagine how attackers, so the crimes organization will focus more on creating profits, because it's for profit. The cybercrime is for profit. So the more profit you gain and the less effort it costs you, the more you invest in this kind of activities. So probably the cyber risk, because of the rising of the cyber crime scene, will rise every single year. So I think it's quite important to mention this. And it's also quite important to mention this, that on the other side are a very sophisticated, very big organization that are created for providing values. So providing value, so create the money for those, let's say, bad guys. And that because they are very well organized, the more sophisticated tools they can use, and the more talented people that could acquire. So it's also quite important. And the third part is the incident. Those on this slide are only organizations that have the incident, third-party incidents. So what's also important, especially from different threat reports, you can dig into ENISA, you can dig into Verizon, you can dig into Microsoft threat reports from this year or from the previous years. What's from my perspective as cyber specialist, what's important? It's first of all, the malware is one of the main also it's still valid, so it's the one of the main attack sources. Similar to the ransomware is rising. If you dig into an ESA threat report, you will see that the ransomware, especially in the field of the attacking for money, is the first and the main attack tactics or source. Of course, the social engineering is very useful for attackers because it's very easy to implement and it's very cost effective. So those two, because of those two categories, they will be used very often, because if they're quite easy to implement and it's cost effective, the attackers will use it. But from this presentation perspective, you need to focus more on supply chain attacks. Why? Because they are more and more frequently used against more sophisticated and more mature organization. Because the attackers knew that if they invest more resources, more money to attack bigger organization, that they could, through this organization, attack more targets, then they will do this. That's why the supply chain attacks are so important to handle and to manage, especially in the future. And of course, as I mentioned previously, there are lots of laws and regulations that focuses on the third party or the supply chain. I mentioned the most important ones, especially from European perspective, but of course I also mentioned some other regulations that are commonly used all around the world and especially in the United States. So I'll start from the NIST 2.0, and there are two main supply chain requirements. First of all, it's the organizations should emphasize on security concerning relationship between entities and their suppliers and service providers. And the second one is ensuring that we acquire, development and maintenance of different IT network system for in the case of the different kind of vulnerability management and disclosure. And it's similar with the our Polish NIS implementation law, so the UKSC, that in one case we have to focus on the ICT supply chain, and the second one is refer to ICT services, products, vulnerability of those services, software and products in different supply chain, in the supply chain. And there is also DORA. I think that DORA is the most sophisticated and the most detailed regulations right now, because it's not DORA itself. There are also the implementation, let's say, standards that are also the part of the DORA implementation. So in one case, there are different requirements in DORA for managing the supply chain of the ICT suppliers, but there we have also the technical standard for contractual agreement. So we need to implement very detailed requirements in our contracts. And there are also requirements how to manage the third-party risk management. And we have also additional, let's say, good practices and recommendation for DORA from the EBA, EIOPA, and ESMA for third-party risk management and incident classification. And in Poland, we've got some additional recommendation for the standard agreement for DORA regulation for suppliers. So there's a lot of additional laws and regulations and requirements that we need to take into consideration if we are in the finance sector. There, of course, as Janek mentioned, the GDPR requirements. So there are a lot of requirements for processors, and also interconnected with sub-processors that the administrator or controller have to take into consideration. So the full due diligence process, the contractual obligation, contractual agreements, so like the data processing agreement in place, the ongoing monitoring, and sometimes vendor audits we have to implement, and we have to also implement sometimes risk assessment of our vendors. And in our vendors have to disclose all sub-processors that are taking, they are also involved in processing our data. So it's GDPR perspective. We've got also from the US perspective, so the health protected information under HIPAA. So I will say it's quite similar, if you are not familiar with HIPAA, to the GDPR requirements. So there is, if you are business associate, there is similar to data processing agreement, business associate agreements, and in those agreements, you have to also implement technical organization and technical safeguards for health protected information, and also inform about all incidents, so reporting about incidents according to HIPAA, and all organizations that process the health protected information have to be HIPAA compliant. And also CCPA, so the California Consumer Protection Act, it's also similar. So the let's say processors or the organization service providers that we share the consumer data, personal data, they also have to have safeguards in place, and also they have to delete the data when we have obliged to ask them to. So all those things have to be in the contractual agreements and contractual clauses. Okay, so the supply chain. Supply chain is quite sophisticated to manage because I think the third-party risk management is very hard to manage. And if you add 4th, 5th parties, it's very complicated, and I even could say it's impossible to manage, and it's only the 1/3 of the management in the of the supply chain. Why? Because there are different, from my perspective, different categories of the supply chain management categories. So one is entity, so organization. In the first place, I will cover in the next slides mainly the organization, so TPRM process. But I would like to mention other aspects of the supply chain management. So the organization, the service or the product the organization provide could affect our processes. So this one part of this. The other, we could share our data to the to other organization, or we could give access to other organization, access to our environment or data. So this is one category. The other is the software related category. So it's the different parts of the software we use. We could use the third-party software, but this software could be also created from the other parts. So this other fourth-party libraries and so on. We could also develop this kind of software inside, but it will also be created from this different parts. So we have to also take into consideration. Same with hardware. So it's also the part of the infrastructure we have to cover. So from supply chain, there are a few different things we have to take care. So like Janek said, we have to have the SBOM or some kind of register of the components. Those Janek mentioned about the vendors. I mentioned about the software components, and also managing the vulnerabilities in those code, and rely or verifying the legal aspects of the third-party code used. So this is one aspect. The second one is the software development, secure software development lifecycle. So we have to implement this to manage the risks. And from the hardware supply chain perspective, first of all, we have to know what we have in our infrastructure. So we have to create the inventory of the hardware we are using, and create the traceability of the components. Why? I think the last incidents between or attack using the pagers and other components that were the Israeli Special Operation Forces implement into the terrorists' hardware is a perfect example how important of the hardware supply chain management is. There is also other component of this, device certification. We could use the common criteria to verify if the software, if the hardware and software components are certified according to some common criteria baseline. Same with trusted partners, and verify the alliance and threat intelligence to be aware if this components are secure from the vulnerability perspective, or from the, let's say, political perspective. Okay, so right now we have to dig into TPRM program. At the beginning, I'd like to start from why it's not working at all. So our approach is not working, and according to the Ponemon Institute and CyberGRX reports, what we've created, so mainly the program that it's based on the spreadsheets and questionnaires, it's not working. Why? Because we spent a lot of time and invest a lot of resources to create those questionnaires and or fulfill those questionnaires, depend on the organization. But at the end, no one is reading it or no one is caring what's inside of those questionnaires, what's inside in those questionnaires is. So this is the main thing that it's the main findings from those reports, that we invest really a lot of time and effort, and it's money, but at the end the information we got from those questionnaires are in most cases completely irrelevant or not useful for us. And we also do not, those questionnaires very rarely, we took actions after we read those questionnaires. So at the end, it's not working probably in those situations. I think it's not because of the frameworks, because there are a lot of very good frameworks, and in most cases, this is one of the examples. You could dig in and find out different standards, different frameworks for third-party risk management or for third-party risk management, and I agree with what's in those frameworks, what's in those steps. So there are different steps. First is the initiation and risk classification. So we start from connecting the strategy to our TPRM process, and we define roles in this process. We defined risk appetite. We defined risk metrics to assess our vendors, and it's very good idea. I think it's generally best practice. Then we assessing vendors. So we do our due diligence program. We create some risk assessment of those vendors. We report. We establish some baseline requirements for vendors, and based on those requirements, we choose vendors, put some requirements in the contract, and that's it. And of course, annually we will verify high risk vendors, or let's say medium risk vendors. So it's quite normal steps to be to follow, but at the end it's not working. And what are, from my perspective, my experience, common problems related to TPRM programs? First problem from my perspective is not very granular requirements and different vendor categories. In most cases, the big companies have have very limited range of categories of their vendors, and they also, based on those very limited categories, they have very similar approach for assessing different vendors. And I've seen the questionnaires that was sent, same questionnaires that were sent to data center providers and SaaS providers of the marketing services. So completely different services, completely different risks for those services, and the requirements for those, and the requirements and the questionnaires for those suppliers were slightly similar. So both of them spent a lot of time fulfilling those questionnaires. And after that, the people who got this questionnaire spent a lot of time reading some answers that are not connected or not applicable to those vendors. So it's completely senseless approach. So we have to be more granular in our requirements and creating vendor categories. The next one is limited ability to verify vendor responses. In most cases, it's only text-driven assessments. So the questionnaire is just text both ways. So it's not the real evidences, and we do not verify the real evidences. So it's the false sense of security. If we only would like to assess the vendor based on their text answers. Next problem I see is the responsibility management of the vendor management office. Why? Because it's not their processes. So the requirements that are put in place, so the security requirements, legal requirements, privacy requirements, business continuity requirements, and so on, it's not the requirements and of the vendor management office. And they are just like the email contact point that send those questionnaires, and then they receive them and they don't care because they have lack of sufficient expertise to analyze them. So it's another problem. Another problem from my perspective is compliance driven assessments. So a lot of organization, a lot of TPRM experts or TPRM people just check boxes. If it's comply, if organization have, let's say, ISO certification, just check box, and for them it's okay. Similar to the, let's say, SOC 2 report. If the company sent SOC 2 report, just check the boxes that they send it, do not read them, and put this report in some catalog and forget about it. So I think it's also another problem. Ineffective verification tools, so spreadsheets, Excel, it's not something you will like to use if you have hundreds or thousands of vendors. I think the only solution is to implement some tools that could help you automatically assess vendors, and also use some tools that are, let's say, AI supported, AI driven, to assess some of the answers that the organization provide you. And at the end, it's maybe it's quite surprising. It's lack of well-defined audit rights and access for auditors. I thought it's quite I think it's quite surprising for you, but from my perspective, when I was hired to assess the vendors and by some big company, but at the end the vendors based on the audit right don't want to give me the access to the evidence as I needed, or to systems I needed. So it's I think the not very broadly defined access rights could be a problem to properly assess vendors. Next one is undefined security, privacy, and continuity requirements in contracts. Very often they are not a very high level, so the criteria are very high level. They are not very defined controls, or it's more wish list than the control list that the third party like me or the SOC 2 auditor can took and verify compliance with those requirements. Another one is not confirmation from vendor on implementation of those required controls or the requirements. Also, it's the false sense of the security that the vendor really met those requirements. I often saw that the management just accept the risk that we are not compliant with the requirements in the agreements. And then the last one, the lack going visibility of vendor control environment, especially when we sign the contract. It's also a problem. Of course, some of the organization have implemented the ongoing monitoring. In most cases, it's only for high-risk vendors, and they do not verify what's changed in the risk environment and what's changed in the control system of those vendors. So from my perspective, is how to improve those TPRM programs. So what I will do to improve it. First of all, I will implement more granular risk-based requirements for different vendor categories. So it's more tailored sets of requirements for different categories of vendors, like SaaS vendors could be one main category, but in this category, there should be different categories of vendors. It could be HR vendor, because then there will be high risk of data protection, especially the privacy, similar with, let's say, health data. But on the other side, we could have something like management marketing tool that it's generally low risk data, low risk service from our perspective. We have to also take into consideration what kind of external vendors, what kind of processes they are supported, because sometimes they will support some critical processes, and then we have to take into consideration, for example, not only the security aspects of this, but also the continuity aspects. What could happen when our vendor do not provide any services because the service is not available? What happened next? Next one, we should focus on evidence-based assessments. So not only questions and answers, but also some verifiable evidences. It could be reports, but at the end, some screenshots from the systems should be a common practice. Next one, reassign responsibilities for TPRM elements across departments. So security department, privacy department, and so on. So those departments should really be involved in the TPRM process. Shift to security first, not just compliance. So I think it's more culture based shift, because it's easy to be compliant, but it's much harder to verify if the vendor is secure. Upgrade verification tools from Excel spreadsheets to some GRC tools. I think the future will be GRC tools AI supported or something like that, because it will provide you a much more efficient way to assess the questions and to assess the evidences the vendor will upload to your tool. So I think it will be the future. Of course, to define and enforce audit rights. not only more detailed way, define it more detailed way, but also maybe put some penalties for violating those audit rights. Incorporate more clear, more detailed list of security controls into your agreements and contracts. Require formal confirmation of implementation of the controls. I think the good example is something that it's common in the SOC 2 practices, or generally SOC 1, SOC 2 practices, that the management provides, executive management provides some kind of letter that confirms that they implement all the contractual and regulatory requirements, and the control will be effective probably through all the contract duration. So it's a much more strict way to confirm the implementation of the control than just to sign the contract. And of course, the established continuous monitoring process with vendors that are still there, that we have contract with. There are 3 different vendor assessments from my perspective. One is the internal audit. So we use our internal resources to audit the third party on the vendor. We could use the third party audit company, or we can use external assessments like SOC 2, ISO. And I will show you some pros and cons of those assessments. I really encourage you to use internal audit. I know that it's kind of tricky because it involves a lot of internal resources, but it provides more insight, not only from the vendor perspective, but also from your internal process perspective, because the internal audit have also insight on your internal processes, not only assessing the third party itself. But of course, it has a lot of weaknesses because we have in our organization limited resources. We could have insufficient qualification to assess IT controls, especially different kinds of IT controls like cloud controls, data center controls, and so on. And the internal audit team is more focused on internal priorities than verifying external parties. But what are main consideration? Especially what you should remember, that your organization and your vendor probably have completely unique risk profiles and risk management approach. That's why your requirements could be completely different from their perspective. So that's why it's quite important to understand. For using third-party audit company, what are the strengths of using this kind of approach? The first is the completely independent perspective on vendor processes. The second one is probably much better expertise in different standards and specific technologies. And the third one is the experience in assessing third parties. So it's more standardized way of assessing different organization. There are, of course, weaknesses of this approach. Higher costs comparing to using internal resources. Sometimes limited customization. So for your specific needs, it's mainly focuses on the vendor, not your processes, and it's bound by the contractual terms and conditions. So it's also the weakness because sometimes depends on your agreement with your vendor. The access to the systems and to evidence could be limited by the vendor. And the third approach, using different certification or attestation assessment or different assessment. I only mentioned some of them. There are a lot of those assessments. The most commonly used are ISO certification. So ISO 27001, ISO 22301, and other ISO standards. So it's most common use in Europe, in Asia, and the SOC attestation, SOC 1, SOC 2, SOC 2 plus, SOC for cybersecurity, or SOC for supply chain. It's mainly it's commonly used in the United States, Canada, Australia, and sometimes United Kingdom. So it's ISO and SOC are the most commonly used, let's say, standards for verifying vendors or suppliers. There are other, let's say, attestation standards. Cloud Security Alliance Star. There are different, let's say, levels of those approach. The least let's say hard one is the self-assessment, so star 1. The star 3 is the most challenging one because it's ongoing assessment. There are few very trusted, from my perspective, assessment, like high trust, like FedRAMP, especially level 3, like DoD requirements, the CMMC, especially level 3, or ITER requirements. So there are different levels for organization, let's say, external assessment certification. I will rely more on those which are more, the requirements are more strict. So like high trust, like FedRAMP, like CMMC level 3, then like something like ISO or even SOC attestation. And I will mention later why. There are different, challenges with those certification and attestation, and I will share my thoughts about it. First of all, from my perspective, of course, it's first of all, it's not about the ISO itself. It's about the approach for certification process, especially for some of the companies. It's not all the certification companies, but I see that the certification process is more watered down, especially when smaller organizations, smaller companies could certify other. It's high chance that the auditor will be, let's say, verifying only the papers and sometimes ask for, let's say, compliance evidence, not dig deeper into how the system is working and if some controls are working or not efficiently. So it's my observation. So from my perspective, ISO certification could be watered down. There is also probably limited cybersecurity maturity of ISO certified companies. It's not also I not mention that it's all companies, but I see that the maturity of ISO companies comparing to, for example, high trust companies, it's much lower. The next problem, I see that companies are looking for ISO certification and do not verifying the scope. because you could have the company that could have ISO certification in place, but the scope do not cover the service you bought, and it's completely irrelevant then for this to verify ISO certification if it's not covering the services you are going to buy and or you bought. So this is another problem. And another problem from my perspective is limited access to certification details. So you just have the certification and that's it. So it's one pager, two pager certification, and you don't have anything else. Sometimes you could ask for the report, so certification report. Sometimes you could ask for statement of applicability, but it's all still mostly high level documents, and without very detailed information. How to strengthen the ISO certification from the client perspective? So first of all, verify the scope, or ask if you are want to your vendor to be ISO certified. Specify that this service you are going to buy have to be in the scope. So this is the first step. The second step is ask your vendor to put the contractual requirements into the company statement of applicability. Then you will ask for statement of applicability, and you will, let's say, know is your requirements, your controls are in place. And of course, it's something additional. Ask if for mapping your controls and your requirements for a statement of applicability, but on the same granular level. And also obtain those mapping and those statement of applicability annually to verify if something changed. But not only ISO have problems. From my perspective, there are also challenges with the SOC attestation. I think the most common problem is that some of our organizations do not do the audits according to SAE standards. They are using international standards, so ISAE 3202, and it's restrict, and because it's not the US standard, that it could be provided by non-US CPA. So it's, from my perspective, it's less rigorous approach. Next one, verify, or sometimes the SOC team do not have sufficient technical expertise to assess very technical or specific controls. So it's also a problem when CPA or CPA team do not have sufficient technical expertise and verify also high-level tests and high-level evidence to gather evidence in the SOC 2 attestation. The next one is the client do not verify or do not require additional criteria. So the most common approach is that the final client asks for SOC 2 type 2 report, but do not inform what kind of criteria, especially additional criteria, have to be in SOC report. And I saw different organizations from same, let's say, sector, same service, that one have the only security criteria because they are mandatory, and the second company have, let's say, three additional criteria, let's say availability, privacy, and confidentiality in place, additionally to security criteria. And this second one report is much more valid, because if the service the availability criteria or privacy and confidentiality criteria is important for the service, then have to be included in the SOC 2 report also, and especially if the organization is involved in the processing of privacy information, like according to, let's say, GDPR, and do not input the GDPR as additional criteria, so SOC 2 type plus attestation, then it also do not cover the GDPR requirements. And the last one, similar to the criteria, but more granular, the organization do not ask the vendor to input their requirements and their controls to the SOC report. So it's also something similar to ISO requirements. And from my perspective, is how to strengthen the SOC attestation. First of all, the SOC attestation, from my perspective, should be based on SAE 18 standard. And have to be conducted by US CPA. The second one is some kind of technical expertise criteria for the auditors that will cover the SOC report. And I think the best approach is not to list it, the certification that this team have to have, but just to give like DoD directive. And then there is a lot of technical cybersecurity certification in place that SOC team have to have one of them to provide this kind of service. The next one is additional criteria. I think it's not only the SOC 2 report, it's the important, but also the criteria are very important. So specify additional criteria for your clients. And so like privacy, confidentiality, availability, and processing integrity criteria, depending, of course, on the services, and sometimes add some additional frameworks if it's valid, like GDPR, HIPAA, NIST, AI Act, or something like that, because then you will have much more comprehensive report to read. And also ask your client to specify your requirements and your controls in the system description, so in the report, and then based on your controls, the auditor will verify the efficiency of those controls. So it's pretty much everything. I try to today speak much faster and cover, let's say, less topics than in previous presentation. If you have some questions, I think we have additional 5 minutes. So please ask. Look, I will ask questions. I will try to answer. If you want to connect me, this is the contact information. You can email me, you can call me, you can connect me through the LinkedIn or through my web pages. So that's it.